Yoda, everyone, it's Nathan Rose here in beautiful Auckland, New Zealand. Welcome to Dynamics 365 SLAs Demystified. I've recently had to configure SLAs in Dynamics 365 customer service for a client, and I thought I would do a deep dive into how these work and how to configure them so that it's a little bit easier for you. All right, so before we dive into it, let's go through an ERD for the SLAs, because I think it's really important to understand how these are put together and the various tables involved so that you know what you're dealing with and how to work with it. So let me go ahead and share my screen and let's dive in. All right. You should now be seeing an ERD for the SLA. And it's important to go through this because generally speaking, we think about the SLA as it applies to a case. But as you can see here, it's a bit more complicated. So let me go through this and explain what all these things are. So ultimately, we want this SLA to apply to the case, but the way it works is we've got to set up all these various bits and pieces for the SLA. So we start with the SLA itself. This is kind of a header for everything else that's involved. Next, there's an SLA item, and this is what ties everything together. So the hours that apply to when the SLA calculates, the KPIs that it's measuring, and then the SLA KPI instance, which actually generates when the SLA is applied to the case. So these are the bits of the SLA. The SLA KPI tracks the various bits and pieces that we're measuring for this SLA. So when it applies and the table on the case that we're going to stick this SLA KPI instance on. The next bit are the business hours. So out of the box, Dynamics assumes that your service environment is 24/7, 365 days a year. However, not every organization works that way, and so Dynamics gives you the ability to specify the hours when your service department is operating so that the SLA only applies when people are actually working. Same with the holiday calendar, so you can specify the days during the year when your operation is closed for national holidays, things like Christmas and New Year's and whatnot. Then, as I mentioned, the SLA KPI instance is generated when an SLA is applied to a case, and this is what keeps track of the time that the SLA is due and how far along you are in terms of the progress, and that's represented on the case via a lookup. So these are the tables that are involved. But when setting them up, we actually have to do things a little bit in reverse. And so I've put together an order of operations to show you how to go about this. So let me just slide over here. And this is the order of operations you need to go through when creating an SLA in Dynamics 365. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to specify the business hours. Now let me come over here to the customer service admin app, and you're going to specify them here. You're going to come over to calendar under operations, and you're going to specify the customer service calendar. And these are the hours that our service department is operating. So you can see we work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, so basic 40 hours. The next thing we need to do is we need to specify the holiday calendar. So the dates that our service department is closed for national holidays. So let me just pop back over here to the holiday calendar. And you can see the dates when we're closed. So these are New Zealand's public holidays. These are the dates that the service department is closed. And so the SLA won't apply to those days either. Once we've done that, we need to come in and create our SLA KPIs. So let's come over back to the service app, and we're going to come to service terms and SLA KPIs. This is what they look like. And so when you create these, you'll give it a name, you'll specify the table that it's against. So out of the box, it will be case. You can apply SLAs to other tables, but out of the box, it works with the case. Next, you're going to specify the KPI field. I'll just quickly deactivate this. I've noticed that these are not showing when I activate them. When I deactivate it, you can see it's on the first response by KPI, and it's applicable from the created on date of the case. Just go ahead and reactivate that. So that's the SLA KPI. This measures what we're tracking on the actual SLA. Once we've done that, so we've created our business hours and holiday calendar, we've created our SLA KPI and activated it. Now we're going to create the SLA itself. So we come back here to the service terms, and we're going to come here to service level agreements, and we'll go and create that. And so the SLA, again, kind of acts as a header for the SLA and the items and the KPIs that it's attached to. So you'll give it a name and you'll specify the table that this SLA is attributable to. Once you've done that, we can start creating SLA items. Those are these here. So let's open this up. And this is what an SLA item looks like. So again, you'll give it a name and you'll assign the SLA KPI that you've created to it. Now, a quick word of warning. Once you've saved this, you can't change the KPI associated to the SLA item. So if you get this wrong, you would have to delete it and start again. So we set the KPI, we set the business hours. So these are the hours that this KPI is effective in. Next, we set when this is applicable. So when this happens on the case. Now I've kept this very simple with out of the box columns just to show you how it works, but this is basically applicable from when the case customer contains data, we start running this SLA. And the success criteria, again, this stipulates when this happens on the case, this fulfills the SLA and we can mark whether it has succeeded or not. And so again, when the description on the case contains data, this marks the SLA as having succeeded. You can override criteria if you want. So if you want to pause SLAs or whatnot, I've not configured that. Then we set the duration for when we warn or when the SLA fails. And I'm going to come back to this because there's a bit of complexity here we need to unpack. And then lastly, we configure the actions on the SLA. Now, when we click on this, this is going to pop us out to Power Automate, and it's going to specify or let us specify what happens when we need to warn on the SLA, when the SLA fails, or when the SLA succeeds. What do we do? So this is going to pop open Power Automate, and we're going to get a pre-populated flow. Once this loads, so we've got a pre-populated cloud flow that's triggered when the SLA KPI instance is modified. Brings us to a switch condition, so the SLA is near non-compliance, i.e. the warning has succeeded, or is non-compliant, has failed. Now we need to fill these out. There's nothing in here at the moment, but this is where you can come in and you can start to configure things the same way you would in any other Cloudflow and Power Automate. So generally speaking, we're going to do things like send an email to the owner of the case or the customer service manager or something like that. You can configure all that here in the Cloudflow. And we won't go into detail on that because this works exactly the same way as it would in any other Cloudflow. All right, so that's our SLA item. Once we've coming back to our order of operations, once we've created the SLA item, all we need to do is activate the SLA. And if it's the only one running in the system, we'll set it as the default. But let's come back to these warning and duration times, because again, this tripped me up, and it wasn't until my colleague Dipesh Daya explained this to me that I got my head around what was happening. So SLAs are either expressed in hours or days. And depending on the organization you work with, they might say, we have an 8-hour SLA, we have a 2-day SLA, something like that. And so we can click here and choose when we warn and when the SLA fails. Now, the warning is optional, the failure is mandatory. Now, you'll see here the out-of-the-box choices goes from minutes to hours, and then after 8 hours, it suddenly jumps to days. Now, this is where this can get confusing, because if we put in 1 day, you might be thinking this is 1 business day. However, Microsoft assumes 24/7, 365-day SLA coverage unless you tell it otherwise. And so if we say 1 day, this assumes 24 hours. However, we've got a service calendar attached here that says we only have 8 hours in a working day. So 1 day, according to our service calendar, is actually going to be 3 working days, because 3 working days is 24 hours. So this can take a bit of time to get your head around. Now, I find the easiest way to think about this is to express the SLA in hours. So say, for example, in this SLA, again, we want to warn after 8 hours. So let's choose this again. And then let's say we have a 5 working day SLA, which is 5 8-hour shifts in our service calendar. So let's express this. Again, you can see it's defaulted to 40 hours. I wrote this in as 40 hours and hit tab. It's converted this to days. It's put 1.67 days. Now, this might feel a little confusing because we said 40 hours, and 40 hours is 5 business days to us by our service calendar, but the SLA duration is expressing this in days. So let me illustrate. Let's open up the calculator here, and let's put in 40 hours, and let's divide it by 24. And you see we get 1.67 days. So 1.67 days is 40 hours of SLA time. And so that's how it's being expressed here. Now, this can get really confusing, because to us, this is 5 business days, 5 8-hour shifts, which is 40 hours of SLA time, but it's being expressed as 1.67 days in the SLA. So it could be a little hard to get your head around that. But again, once you understand that, that's how it's being expressed. All right, let me close out of this, and let me show you the active SLA that I've got, and we'll see this in action. So this is an active SLA on the cases, and I've got 2 SLA items. So again, for the first one, we're going to warn after 1 hour, we're going to fail after 8 hours. And then for the second one, we're going to warn after 1 day, and it's going to fail after, warn after 1 day. Again, this is 24 hours. So this would be 3 working days in our business calendar. And it's going to fail after 40 hours, or 1.67 days is how it's expressed, but that is actually 5 working days in our business calendar. Now, I've set these up to be really simple. So we're simply going to apply this SLA when the case customer has data. And when I set the origin, that's going to fulfill the SLA. And likewise, for the second one, it's going to apply again when the case customer contains data. And when I put data in the description, that's going to fulfill it. So these are just out-of-the-box fields. I wanted to keep this simple just to show you how this works. So let's come over to the Customer Service Hub, and let's create a case and see these in action. So let's call this Test SLA 4. And let's go ahead and specify a customer, Graphic Design Institute, and let's save. All right, so we can see that the SLA has applied and it has started calculating. We can also come over here and get another view of the SLA. This is simply a control that I've put on the subgrid for these SLA KPI instances that are generated. Now let me quickly come over to Advanced Find and show you the SLA KPI instance. So these are the ones that just got created. And so you can see we've got a failure time and a warning time. And so for the case, and so this is what's actually calculating the SLA. So again, this is the SLA KPI instance that's been generated now that the SLA is applied to our case. Now let's come back to the case real quick, back to the summary. And the first response is due in 8 hours. However, this says 23 hours and change. Now this is where people can get a little confused because I expected to see 8 hours, but it says 23. So what this is actually doing is it's taking our business calendar into consideration. So if we look at the time, it is currently 4:58 p.m. on a Wednesday here in Auckland. So we've only got about 2 minutes of applicable SLA time today on this case. Now, the business doesn't open until 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. So we've got a chunk of time in the middle, and then we've got most of this 8 hours applicable tomorrow. So that we've got until pretty much close to 5 p.m. tomorrow, Thursday, to fulfill this first SLA. So that's why this is expressed this way. It can be a little confusing, but we do have those 8 hours. This is how long until those 8 hours expire according to the business calendar. Now the next one can get even more confusing. So our second part of the SLA is 5 business days, which we've expressed as 40 hours because that's 5 8-hour shifts. So why is it saying 7 days and change? Because this is a little confusing. Well, let's take a look at the calendar to see why it's doing that. So it is now close to the end of the day on Wednesday. So the SLA is going to apply on Thursday, 1, 2, Friday, so 16 hours, that's 2 days. It's going to skip Saturday and Sunday, but that's 4 days. Monday, another 8 hours, that takes us up to 24. Tuesday takes us up to 32. And then Wednesday, which takes us to the 40 hours. So if we count backwards, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And so that's why we have 7 hours and 7 days and a bit of change, because again, this has come in at the end of our working day on a Wednesday. So we've got a number of hours overnight where this SLA is counting down, and then it's going to start taking hours out of that SLA tomorrow from 9 to 5, Friday 9 to 5, and Monday and Tuesday, and so on and so forth. So that's how these are calculated and how these are represented. This can get really confusing because in business language, we might say we have an 8-hour SLA, we have a 5-day SLA, something like that, or even a 24-hour SLA. But it's really critical that we specify what we mean by that with the client and then understand what the system is doing. Because again, say for example, we say we have a 24-hour SLA, that's really 8 hours in terms of the way the SLA is computed in Dynamics 365 with our business closures. All right, so let's go ahead and satisfy this SLA. So let's satisfy the first one by setting the origin. Let's go ahead and save. And you can see our SLA has succeeded. And the same for the second one. We just need to enter the description. So let's say test description, close SLA. Let's save. And you can see it's succeeded. So our SLA has now succeeded, and because we have met the criteria. So I hope this helps demystify the SLAs in Dynamics a bit. They can be a bit confusing, but hopefully this makes it a little bit clearer how they work and some of the discrepancies between the business language for the SLA, the way it's expressed in Dynamics, and what you actually see on the case. So again, to review, we've covered off the ERD for the SLA, and you really want to think of the SLA item as the glue that holds everything together in terms of your business hours, the KPIs you're measuring, and then the KPI instance, which is what represents all of these SLA details as they apply to the case in particular. And the SLA is really just a header that holds it all together. Then in terms of the order of operations, to set these up, you want to start by creating your business hours and your holiday calendar. And then you kind of work backwards by starting by creating your SLA KPI. Then you create your SLA. Then you create your SLA item. You activate everything and set it as default. So that's how you set up the SLA in Dynamics 365. One more thing that I want to call out when you're setting these up is on the service calendar, back here to calendar, you can set the time zone that you're in. So I've set the time zone for Auckland and Wellington, which is where I'm located. It defaults to UTC. Let me quickly close this. Sometimes when you set these, you might see weird things on the case because unless you specify the user's time zone settings in their personal options, so this defaults to UTC. I've changed it to Auckland and Wellington so that it aligns with what the service calendar is doing. But if you see discrepancies or things that don't make sense, you want to make sure that you set this in each user's service instance. So that's SLAs Demystified. I hope this makes it easier next time you need to set one up in Dynamics 365 Service. Thanks so much for watching. Go do something awesome on the Power Platform today, and I'll talk to you soon.